Welcome to our Kingdom Conversations. Today we're talking all about growth groups. And this is part of our series as we've been thinking about and exploring what it means to be part of a growth group here at St. Luke. And today we have Matt and Allie Brenner. Thanks for joining us. Good to have you. And y'all have been members for about 5 years. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, about 5 years. And you got a young daughter, Blair, and we're recording this after bedtime, which I recognize with parents of young children, everything revolves around nap time and bedtime, and the whole world shifts according to that. So thanks for taking the time to do this. And, you guys have been part of a growth group right along. You've been members for 5 years, and we were talking a little bit before this, and sort of from the beginning, you've been part of a growth group. And Matt, I heard you saying that you were introduced to the parents when you and Allie met, and then introduced to the growth group when you guys were kids. And the group had to vet you. So anyway, as we're thinking about growth groups, you all have a great perspective, and we're going to think specifically about sort of joining a group, checking a group out. What does it feel like to be part of one on the front end, and switching groups, stuff like that. So anyway, tell us about your experience with growth groups. How long you've been part of one? What do you like most about them?
So I think, when I first started coming to St. Luke, before we were even dating, I think there was a Sunday like in the fall where they were talking about growth groups. And then after the service, you could go out and talk to someone if you're interested in joining one. So I did that, and, they just kind of asked like what days of the week worked with my schedule or what times and things like that. And then they ended up connecting me with a group. And it was kind of intimidating, I would say, at first, to just drive to a house of someone I didn't know with a house full of people that I also didn't know at the time. But everybody was really welcoming, and I kind of knew that I wanted to be involved in church, and I knew I had to like start finding an avenue to meet people and build relationships. And so I just kind of pushed myself to do it, even if it wasn't the most comfortable thing in the world. But, it ended up being the people in that first growth group that I joined, became good friends, and they kind of became the building blocks for a lot of the relationships that I ended up building at church, and even, friendships that we still have now. And then that after a couple of years, that group kind of dissolved, like people kind of moved or went different places. So then I joined our current group, and that was just kind of, I think, there had been a couple groups that had kind of shifted members, and there were some people that were looking for a new group, and that's kind of how our current group ended up forming.
Gotcha. That's awesome. And then Matt, you kind of joined into that group when you all started dating. And
Yep. Yeah. So that was basically, I didn't have to go through the whole learn works process, but it was kind of cool. I had gone to church on Sundays with her a few times, and then like she said, a way to be able to meet new people was pretty cool to have. And at least I had her as my crutch where she went in on her own. It was very nice. They're all welcoming, very understanding if you weren't going to talk right away or anything. And they'll encourage you a little bit, but they throw you kind of softballs and get you kind of warmed up. And it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And, Allie, with you being a teacher, you have a lot of students come in for the first day of school, and, they're so anxious and nervous. And I don't know how it is for all the students, but I know when I was, in school, the first day is always the scariest. And then day 2, you're like, all right, I got this.
Yeah.
Just walking through the door and the initial part, but then it goes away fast. And I think with growth groups, it's kind of the same way, that the first 5 minutes, but then it dissolves and goes away, and you feel welcome. Right. Yep. Cool. Well, that's great. And it's neat to hear. I appreciate how you brought up the fact that, these groups are not static in any way. They are very dynamic, in that they form and then they change people, and folks hop on and hop off based on schedule and life. And then new groups, form again. And so as I've worked with growth groups they are very dynamic things, new people shifting and everything. Tell us a bit about that. I mean, our growth groups, do they last forever? Do they stop changing, or what's your experience with the change of growth groups?
Well, mine, like the first group that I was a part of, it was a lot of kind of like young families, I would say, in that first group. And a lot, different ones would kind of go out if the like schedule wise it didn't work for them that session, and other ones would come in. And then when that group kind of, I think everybody just kind of had different schedules at that point. The times weren't working for a lot of people. So when we kind of joined new groups, then there were some people from our old group that joined our new group. So we did know some people, but then a lot of new people that we've met along the way too. And then I know like last fall when we did the Red Letter Challenge. So that was, that was a time that we weren't with our like regular group. And that was another, I felt like that was another really good opportunity. We met a lot more people through that again, and kind of developed some new friendships through that we hadn't had in the past too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's just interesting how Pastor Davis always talks about group dynamics and how they sort of start all over when any one new person's added, and some element of the group remains the same, but you just inject one new person, a boyfriend or something like that becomes a husband, and suddenly the group is a little different,
Yeah.
And that's what I've come to appreciate is, my growth group's kind of the same as what you're describing. When we started, there were no kids, and it was like this quiet, peaceful conversation where we all like listened to what other people were saying. And then sort of one kid was born, and then there were two, and then suddenly it became like bedlam with a bunch of babies in the middle, and nobody was, you were yelling across the group and everything. But it's been neat just to see. And then now the kids have gotten a little older, and just, and every time we've kind of experienced like there's something we love about it the way it is. Honestly, we kind of mourn a little bit when it changes and you lose something, because you're sort of like, oh man, I missed that. But then in the midst of it, something new comes up, and it, you experience that new joy, and it's just whatever it is, they're not the same yesterday, today, tomorrow. They're always shifting, but that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
And that's been your experience too, that it's just constantly moving. Well,
yeah. And I think people in our group too, sometimes they're traveling, or, there's all sorts of things going on, or they have a commitment a certain time of the year. So,
or there's a pandemic and we have to do it on Zoom. And
right.
Yeah. And now, potentially doing some in person, some Zoom, some at the church, the combination of the two. So that's another, it seems like there could be some people that'll maybe hop out for this session. But we'll catch you next round has been the communication. And so like you said, it might not work for you all the time, and that's fine, but it's nice to know that you have that foundation there, so that if, this round doesn't work for me, I like these people, I like everything about it, I don't have to worry about like daycare. You might lose your seat, but not with a growth group. So
yeah, that's good. I'm glad to hear. Well, and what's neat too is what both of you are saying, sort of if you've been part of a group at one point, maybe try it again, because your kind of life situation is different. That group's different. All the things are different. And just like you were saying, kind of Matt, that, maybe Zoom didn't work for you, but boy, the spring we're hoping to do a lot of stuff outside, and maybe in person. We actually found in person was hard for some people, but Zoom, I kind of feel a little better with that, and yeah, very interesting. And so you all talked a little bit about this, but just what's that experience like joining for a first time? Matt, earlier you said, they don't force you to answer anything or talk all that much, but, just talk people through a little bit. You show up, how does that work?
Yeah.
big red
Usually
sign that says like new person or what?
Right. Yeah, exactly. You get labeled right off the bat. I think, for the most part, we have a little bit of socialization right off the get-go, and it's not like come in, take your seat, and we're going to start right away. So we'll sometimes have a little bit of appetizers and catch up on the week or what we've all been up to, and kind of get going from there, and then start it off with prayer, and then hop into if it's a video or whatever the format is, just go through there. And I don't think it's too intimidating. Obviously, like you said, the first time you walk into somebody else's house and maybe you haven't met them, you're like, this is kind of weird, but I think it's a very nice way to be able to further your relationship with God and with other people at the church. That's one thing that, growing up, I was in weekday school and confirmation and all that as a Lutheran, and I never really got into other things as I grew into adult out of college. And I would just be kind of going to church and then go home right afterwards and kind of, what else is out there. And I think small groups are, a 1 hour or so thing that are pretty easy to work in, to go above and beyond just worshiping and praying on your own. So just the little bit of intimidation off the get-go, I think it's easy to get over, and everyone's understanding that, I've been in that same position. We're not going to make you feel like you're dumb if you have what you think is the wrong answer, but none of us know the real answer, just God does. So it's, it's okay.
Well, and amen to all that. I really appreciate, just how, it's just exactly like you're saying, people welcome you in, and you're not labeled as this, the new person, because a lot of the groups are constantly having new people coming in anyway. And so the fact that you're the new one, and I especially like, the conversations you have in the narthex, they're sometimes pretty surface, and it's sort of, how's the week? How's your weather? The weather, stuff like that. But you get to a growth group, and you get to know people so much faster and so much better than 10 weeks in the narthex. One time at growth group, you get to know someone, like you all said, lots of relationships and friendships. So well, any advice that you all would have to someone who's thinking about checking a group out, maybe apprehensive, has reservations? What thoughts or advice or sympathies do you have for them?
I guess I would just say, just give it a try. I know it can be intimidating or, awkward at first, but I also I like the format of it, how it's set up in the 4 weeks. It's a little bit of a commitment for those 4 weeks, but at the end of it, you can always reevaluate, was that the right spot for you? Do you want to maybe look for another one? So it's not like you're locked in for a lifetime commitment or anything like that. You can try it for, one session, and then the next session, maybe you want to try something else. So,
right.
Yeah. The 4 weeks is, I really appreciate that too, just because it's not forever, and it's really hard to commit to I'll be part of this group every week for 52 weeks till my kid goes off to college or something. That's just really hard to pull off. But yeah, 4 weeks for the fall, 4 weeks for the winter, 4 weeks for the spring. And then some of the groups, they're 4 weeks in a row. Some of them are every other week.
Right.
Some of them are even monthly, which not many of them, but yeah. So awesome. Well, hey, I really appreciate you all sharing your insights and especially your candor in just, it's a little nerve-wracking. But I think hearing from both of you, it is nerve-wracking. It's a little uncomfortable, but it's worth it. I think from what I've heard from you, that some of the closest relationships and friendships that you have in the church have come through this. And I would say exactly the same for me and my family and my growth group, that, you get to talk to people in the narthex, and that's fun and great, but boy, coming into someone's house, that's intimate and close, and sort of real quick, you become kind of best friends.
Right. Yeah. And I would say it also is a good format for you to have, with those close relationships, you have another group of people that you can bring any prayer requests to. And maybe you're not comfortable of, emailing you, Pastor Sutton, and being like, hey, need prayer for this, or you're like, it might not be that big or whatever you think, but, weekly you're meeting with these people, you're getting more comfortable, and, hey, Allie's going to have a baby soon or whatever, when Blair was born, and, just everyone on their mind, and they'll check in with you and see how things are going. And like you had mentioned, sometimes we had some meals, the church does, and they're always reaching out. And so it's just one of those additional resources that you have that, it can be pretty powerful too. So
Yep. Takes a big church and makes it really small with this kind of core intimate group.
Yeah.
And I think again, it is sort of, you put yourself out a little bit in that, but I think the reward for the life together in Christ, the prayer together, I mean, all that stuff, it's just so rich and powerful that it's worth it to kind of
Right.
go out on that ledge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you said it pretty well, and that you don't feel like just a number. You know, if you go, I went to some pretty big churches and stuff like that when I was, becoming an adult, and it's kind of where you're like, I'm just another number. You're in and out, and wave to people you recognize, but you're like, do I actually talk to them? But this really gives you that I'm part of something feel. So
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, hey, I really appreciate you all sharing your insights. And like I said, it's just neat to hear that kind of from the very beginning, you all have been part of a group and not the same group. And there's certainly the people in those groups have changed. But in the midst of all that, sounds like it's been a great blessing to you. And I'm sure this conversation will be a blessing to others. So Matt and Allie, thanks for taking the time, and God's blessings to you all, and blessings to everyone taking part in this conversation.
thank you.
Thank you.